Hello, my friends. Today is the second episode of the stories our followers tell me. As our story goes, it's about a haunted house. I hope you enjoy watching it, and also subscribe to the channel to receive all the new updates. Let's start right away. Intro. I remember that since I was very young, we always moved around the house constantly. My father abandoned us, practically when my sister was born. Because of this, paying rent became unsustainable for a long time. My mother worked 2 jobs and my grandmother took care of us, and also did some sewing. But as I said, we could hardly go out day in and day out. When I was about 12, we came to a dangerously strange house. And I'm not just saying that, because something lived in it, which, to this day, I can find no logical explanation for. So if anyone in the audience knows what it is, please tell me, because I've always had that suspicion. I remember that day as if it was yesterday. It was our first week in this new house, so we were still adjusting. The house was very good, even though we still had to share a room with my grandmother. It was very nice. The rent was very affordable, and the area was one of the safest we've ever seen. That day I got up early, while the rest of my family was getting ready to leave the house. My mother was taking a shower. I knew it because she was the only one of us to take a shower in the morning, and as I was still half asleep, I heard the sound of water dripping from the shower head. Then something strange happened. In my semi-conscious state, I watched my sister get out of bed and leave the room. I was sure it was her. I recognized her gray shorts, which she always wore to sleep when it was too hot, and as she was walking away I assumed she got up to go to the bathroom, and that made me feel a little upset, because I also wanted to go and didn't want her to hit me with that. So I got up quick, and we have this kind of rules where we can throw things at each other or even push each other, as long as it's a win in the bathroom, which is something we did as kids and kept until our teens. I was about to grab one of my pillows to lay on it, however, it was not there, and my gaze quickly turned to my sister's bed. To my horror, there she was, looking asleep. I froze, unable to comprehend what I had just witnessed. Who left the room next? It couldn't be my mom, because she was still taking a shower, and my grandmother was also still sleeping in her bed. Chills ran up my spine, and an uncomfortable feeling invaded me. I was pretty sure that if I saw someone, well, although I was a little sleepy, if I was conscious, I could hear my mom taking a shower, and that was another thing. The shower could be heard, and there was no way my sister would think the bathroom was for use. Those were details I didn't think about because I was sleepy, but I was aware enough to know that my sister had woken up, well, like I said before, even wearing the same clothes she slept in. When my mom came out of the shower, she noticed my restlessness and got worried, and asked me why I was awake, because she told me I looked so pale. I couldn't contain myself and told him everything that had happened. I assured her that it was not my grandmother, for she was sleeping in her bed, because I also heard her snoring when I woke up, and that I clearly saw the gray trousers my sister always wore. My mother tried to reassure me, suggesting it could just be confusion or a lucid dream, or maybe it was just something like a shadow I had discovered in the dark to be my sister, but it really wasn't. But despite her explanations, I knew what I saw was real. In the following days, inexplicable situations continued. Not only did I see someone come out of our room, but also my mother's room. These apparitions took the form of members of my family, I knew they were not them because they appeared at completely random moments of the day, like that time while my grandmother was mending some clothes. I knew I was in my mother's room, where they also kept a sewing machine, not only because my grandmother had told me it was there, but because I had heard how she used the sewing machine. I was watching TV, but suddenly, I started hearing someone in the kitchen. At first, I thought it might be my sister, but she wasn't home at that moment. I walked towards the kitchen, thinking that for some reason my mom had come back early from work. I remember going up and calling her mom's name, but instead of mom answering me, a voice identical to grandma's said to me, "I'll make your favorite food." At that moment, I got so scared that I just ran to where my grandmother was. But even though I told her, she told me that this is what happened to me from watching TV all day. Another night, as I was sitting on the couch watching TV, I noticed my mom entering the living room. It seemed strange to me, because she usually came home from work so tired that she fell asleep straight. But that wasn't the only thing. His existence was different. I looked at her carefully, and realized that her facial expression was cold and distant, her eyes lifeless. My heart sank into my chest when I realized that it was not my mother, but a figure that had taken shape. At that moment, I felt a shiver run down my back, and I was terrified. I didn't know what to do or who to turn to. I froze, watching this presence slowly disappear into the hallway. For a moment, I thought no one would believe me, for it seemed that only I had seen them, and those I had told did not believe me. And that was the case until things started happening to others too. To my grandmother, one day, while she was in the kitchen making dinner, she saw her picture come out from the next room. Her face was filled with panic as she realized that this figure was not hers, but rather a terrifying version, walking with unnatural movements. My grandmother ran into the dining room where we were gathered, and told us what had happened. This time, everyone in the family thought something had happened. The apparitions continued to happen to each member of my family differently. My sister told us she came face to face with her photo while getting ready in the bathroom. Her reflection in the mirror reflected her, but with a piercing look and a smile so obvious that, when she wasn't smiling, she told us that when the reflection was quite certain my sister was seeing him, he winked at her. My mother was also able to see my grandmother's weakness. While she was making breakfast in the kitchen, she saw my grandmother walking towards her from the hall. However, something was off. My grandmother's face had an evil expression, and her eyes seemed to reflect a dark void. My mom was horrified, backed away, and quickly ran away from this sinister presence. One day, while my grandmother was watering some plants in the garden, she told us how she clearly saw that my sister had left the house. My grandmother told her to turn off the water tap, because it was close. But instead of doing that, sister, or whatever that thing was, she said loudly, and called out to her in an insulting way, if she wanted to turn off the hose, she had to go into the house herself. My grandmother says she continued to think it was my sister. Had it not been for the fact that she opened the hall door almost immediately, because she was returning from buying some things at the store. The strange apparitions continued to affect every member of my family in terrifying and disturbing ways. As the days went by, the experiences became stronger, causing all of us to feel a constant fear of being in that house. We can't be quite sure if she's really who we're seeing, or if she's just something that took her form. We no longer feel safe in our home. Every shadow and every noise made us jump with fear. The nights became unbearable as strange sounds and blurry figures seemed to haunt us around every corner. Desperate and overwhelmed with terror, we decided we couldn't take it anymore. So my mother and grandmother decided it was time to move and leave this damned place behind. Once the month was over, we packed up our belongings and left. As we loaded the boxes into the truck, A neighbor approached us with a surprised expression on her face. He told us it was a real miracle that we stayed in that house for so long. In recent years, she told us, most families who moved there didn't last more than a month before fleeing in terror. We froze to hear his words. We never imagined that we weren't the only ones who experienced the horror of everything that lurked in that house. As we moved away from our old home, a sense of ease and freedom began to fill our hearts. Although memories of apparitions and fear accompanied me, at least for me, for many more years. We never knew what we lived in that house, but frankly, there are things in this life that are best left a total mystery, and I just hope no one else has to experience the same thing that my family and I have. Because honestly, what we lived in that house is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. If you like the video, subscribe to receive all new updates.